I'm Shelly from Coral & Co. And today I'm going to be showing you how to make your very own beautiful handmade Christmas stocking. This is an easy Christmas gift to make for you or for a friend. You can download the free printable PDF Christmas stocking pattern at www.coralandco.com. The pattern comes with several different options for you to customize, but today we will be making the basic cuffed Christmas stocking. I'm going to show you step by step how easy it is to make a beautiful Christmas stocking. So join me as we sew up what is sure to become a much loved holiday treasure. Ready? Let's get started. For the Christmas stocking, you are going to need 1 yard of fabric. You are also going to need the stocking template, which you can download at coralandco.com. We're going to start with the main stocking template, and we're going to be cutting 2 main front and back pieces as well as 2 lining pieces. We're also going to be cutting 2 stocking cuff pieces and 1 stocking loop. You're going to unfold your fabric. And you're going to place your stocking template on the fabric. Mine is directional, so I'm making sure to place it horizontally on a straight line. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut around the stocking piece. Here we go. All right, now we have cut 2 of our stocking lining pieces. Our stocking front pieces. We've cut 2 of our stocking front pieces. So we've got 2 of our stocking front pieces, and then we're also going to repeat that. So we have 2 stocking lining pieces. And then 2 stocking lining pieces. And we're also going to cut 2 of our stocking cuff and 1 of the stocking loop. And then you're ready to get started. We are going to place these aside, and we're going to put the stocking lining piece, and we're going to place that right sides together. Be careful if you're using flannel like I am. Handling it, flannel really likes to stretch. And so we don't want the flannel to distort and stretch too much. For the lining piece, you're going to want to make a mark about 2 to 3 inches apart, like I'm doing with these pins, because we are going to be sewing around the stocking lining, but we are going to leave this hole open so we can pull it through. So you're going to want to be sure to mark that. And once we have our stocking lining piece, we'll just set that aside. And we're gonna place our stocking front piece, right sides together. and you are going to clip this in place as well. This one you will be sewing all the way around, so you don't need to worry about leaving an opening. All right, so we're going to sew all the way around this one. And this one, we're going to sew to the pin, and then from the pin, we're going to skip that part, and from the pin, we're going to sew all the way back up. And at this time, you can actually go ahead and take your cuff piece. We're just going to get everything ready here. And I don't have any clips left, so I'm going to use pins. I'm just going to pin my cuff pieces. I have 2 of them, and I'm going to pin those right sides together. And put that to the side. And lastly, I'm going to take my stocking loop, and I'm going to I'm going to fold over my stocking loop. And I'm just going to give it a little pin here too, just to hold it in place. All right, and now we're ready to sew. We're going to start with our stocking front and back piece, and we're going to sew all the way around. Next, we're going to sew the stocking lining piece all the way to the pin. You're going to skip the pin, leaving this open, and then you're going to sew all the way back up to the top. For the cuff piece, you're going to be sewing down both sides, leaving the top and the bottom open. For the loop, you'll just be sewing down one side. All right, let's sew the stocking front. Place it under, and remember, we are going to be using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So that's just a little bit bigger than your 1/4 inch. Make sure you backstitch to start to secure the seam in place. Going around the curve, you're going to want to be sure to sew slowly. And when you get to the curvy piece, just go ahead and sew, needle down and pivot, sew, needle down and pivot. And this should make for a nice and even curve. When you get to the top of the stocking, backstitch to secure in place, lift your presser foot, and trim the threads. I'm going to leave that one there, set that aside for a moment. Now we're ready to sew the stocking lining piece. So for the stocking lining piece, we're going to be sewing down and around, stopping right here at the pin, leaving this part open, starting at the pin and going back up the stocking. to start by back stitching. Back stitch in place to secure. And once again, we're going to be sewing a 3/8 inch seam allowance, which is just slightly bigger than 1/4 inch. When you get to the curves, sew slowly, lift and pivot, and lift and pivot. Needle down, turn slightly. Needle down and turn slightly again. And we are almost to our first pin. We're going to back stitch, lift the presser foot. Perfect. Just going to trim, and then we're going to place it back under, back stitch in place again, remove your pin, and finish sewing around the curve and then up to the top of the stocking. Once again, back stitch in place to secure, lift, and out we go. All right. Now we're going to go ahead and sew the cuff. Whoops. We're going to sew the cuff. Back stitch in place. Secure. Take the pins out to be sure not to get them stuck in your sewing machine or break the needle over them, which I'm good about most of the time, but sometimes I get sewing fast and I forget. All right, and now we're going to sew the other side, down the other side. Back stitch. Back stitch to secure. Lift up, trim. And we've got the last one. We're going to sew straight down. On this one, we are going to be sewing on the loop. We are going to be sewing only 1/4 inch seam because the loop is very small and we don't want to make it any more difficult to turn it right side out. Back stitch to secure and trim. All right, I'm going to set the sewing machine to the side for a moment. And for our stocking front and back, we are going to be trimming notches in the curves so it'll lay nicely when we go ahead and press it and finish the stocking. So I'm just going to trim some notches in the curves here. And I also like to do it a little bit Trim a couple notches in the arc of the front of the stocking, just a couple little clips. And then I like to go ahead and clip a couple on the back here as well. And this will just help the stocking lay nice and flat. And we're going to repeat for the stocking lining. And there we go. All right, now we have trimmed both the stocking front and the stocking back. Now we're going to turn the stocking front right side out. And I'm going to reach in here and use my fingers just to push the seam allowance all the way out. And we're just going to roll it all the way out, making sure all the seams are pushed out nice and flat. All right. And we are going to leave the stocking lining as is for right now. Now we're going to be turning our loop right side out. For this, the most effective way would be use a turning tool, which I know I had one at some point. However, I have children and I'm pretty sure that they thought it was theirs and have since used it and lost it. So put that on the sewing by list. All right, so you can just take your pencil, just put it in there, and you can simply use it to turn. Here we go. Might have to, once you get it started, if you happen to have tweezers, you can also use these tweezers, which I really like to do. And you can reach in and you can grab it. Yep. Just push. There we go. I like these tweezers as well. They are, if you have a serger, these are absolutely indispensable. But I find with things like this, they're a really good tool as well. All right, now we have the loop turned right side out. First up, we're gonna go ahead and press the stocking front. And we're gonna do that just for a nice, even finish, and to make sure that the seam allowances are rolled out and as flat as they can be. Now, if you're sewing with flannel like I am, make sure not to drag the iron across. Make sure to just lift and press, because flannel really likes to stretch. And now you have your stocking front. We're gonna take our little loop and just give it a really quick press. And we're gonna take our stocking cuff, and I want to go ahead and take the seam allowance, and I'm just going to open those and press them nice and flat so that when I fold the cuff in half, it's easier to have it sit nicely, nice and flat, instead of being kind of bulky. Now we're going to take the stocking front piece and we are going to go ahead and put the stocking cuff piece over it. Just going to simply slide the cuff over the stocking. And you're gonna line up the seams. You're gonna line up the seam of the stocking front, and you're gonna line up the seam of the cuff. Once you've done that, we're going to pin those in place. Once these are pinned in place, we're going to add our loop. And for the loop, you're simply just going to fold it in half, add one more pin on the stocking back, right on the seam allowance, and you're going to pin in place. All right. Once you have that done, we're almost there. We are going to take our stocking lining and we are going to slide the stocking lining over the rest of the stocking, over the stocking front, over the cuff, and over the loop. I'm just going to stuff it all in there. And then we're going to line up the raw edges. And once again, we're going to take the seam allowance. I'm just going to press it open and we're going to line it up with the seams on the other ones. And I'm just going to take this pin out and I'm going to re-pin with it on top. I'm going to turn it and do the same for the other side. Take your pin and pin in place. And then I'm going to make sure all three edges are all lined up and that none of them are slipping out. And I'm going to take another pin and pin this one in place. Turn it over and pin one more side. And now we're ready to sew. All right, now we're ready to sew. So we are going to start on the back edge of the stocking. And I'm going to take my free arm off just to give it a little more room. We're going to take this whole of the stocking and we're going to put it around our sewing machine. And this is going to be a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And back stitch in place. If you're going to sew over your pins, you sew very slowly. And or pull them out as you get near them. Line everything up and go ahead and sew your seam all the way around the top of the stocking. Making sure everything stays lined up. And when you get all the way back to the beginning, you're going to back stitch in place one more time to secure, and you're going to lift and trim those threads. Right. If you want, you can go ahead and trim a couple of those off the top. It's up to you. All right. And now comes the fun part. We're going to take your stocking and we're going to take the hole that we had in the bottom, that hole that we left open, and we are going to reach in and we are going to pull the stocking front piece out. I think this is kind of magic. It's like a big bundle, then all of a sudden it becomes something you actually made. And you're going to pull the whole thing out. This is the stocking lining, which we're going to roll all the seams, rolling all the seams. And then we have the stocking top as well as the cuff. We have the lining, and then we have the stocking cuff as well as the stocking front. Now we are simply going to sew up the opening in the stocking lining. So we're just going to take this little opening, we're going to press it under, and we're going to sew. And you have two options for finishing the stocking lining. I like the first option, which is the easy one, which is the quick one. So I am going to go ahead and top stitch just this little piece in my sewing machine. The other option is to hand stitch this opening shut. So I'm going to take this opening and sew about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just along the top. Take a little back stitch, and you don't need to sew all the way along the entire stocking, just over the opening. If you want it to blend in, you can choose to do it with a matching thread. I think it doesn't really matter because it's the inside of the stocking and people aren't really going to be looking at it. Give those threads a little trim, and then we're going to finish the very last part. We're going to take this stocking lining piece and we're going to open up the stocking and we're going to push it in. Push it all the way in the top of the stocking, the toe of the stocking, until you feel the seams right next to each other, and try to push them as flat as you can. And you're going to do this all along the stocking. And then right here, you're going to see the lining and then the cuff. And then I'm going to press it one more time just to give it a beautiful finish. And that's it. Now you have your very own beautiful stocking.